Thank you for staying with us on Channels Television. Welcome to Health Matters. I am Yomi Otaigbe. As more and more schools open for students in exit classes and Lagos joins some other states that have opened worship centers, there exists the tendency for many to think that it's now business as usual, while the government continues to give guidelines on safety protocols to follow in order to defeat COVID-19. Now, more than ever before, is the time for all to adhere to safety measures in order to protect everyone, particularly the vulnerable. How to protect the vulnerable is what we'll be looking at today on the program. And I have with me, my guest is a public health physician, Dr. Ajoke Adewale. Thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Doctor. Okay, so before we go into, talking about how to protect those that are more vulnerable, let's quickly look at Nigeria's COVID-19 figures as they stand as at the evening of August the 17th. So the total confirmed cases is now at 45,687. Recoveries stand at 2,637, while the number of deaths risen to 936. And active cases in the country is currently standing at 12,114. Okay, so Doctor, let's look at some of those figures that I just talked about now. What do you think of where we are right now? We have seen in the past week, we have seen a number of recoveries announced, particularly in Lagos State.
Yes, and that's some good news, because when you look at the COVID-19 curve in the past few days, we see that the COVID curve has been declining. There are many things that we can attribute to this, but what we see is that there are more recoveries and there are less incident cases. So it's welcome, because when the lockdown was eased down in phases, there were many concerns as to whether we are going to have a bigger curve or a bigger explosion. But we are happy to see that all the preventive efforts are being manifest, are showing efforts, are showing improvement in the COVID-19 rate of occurrence in our state. So it's particularly very good, and I can see that is why the government is definitely easing out in phases the lockdown.
Okay, so a number of people have, wondered how we were able to announce over 10,000 recoveries in one day. But of course, the explanation came that it's about, those that were being managed at the home front. But if you look at some of those things that we are now talking about, the easing of some of the social and religious activities, you have said that this is as a result of some of the cases that have declined. But some other people have also pointed out that some of the cases that we saw drop was during the break. And so it's not really a case of that we are having lower infections.
And they may be absolutely right. Many times when we get figures about the COVID-19 incidents, the prevalence, the recovery rates, the deaths, they are not many times reflective of current happenings. They are reflective of cumulative happenings, things that have happened. It may be quite, it may not be possible in our setting to report incidents as they arise. So whenever you see figures, you know that they are likely a result of what has happened in the last few days to weeks. And I understand the concerns of these people. However, we are data dependent, data driven, and definitely, I want to believe, and I can see the commitment on the part of the government that as they are easing down this lockdown, they are also preparing phases, because this is not a time to relax. Even as we are easing down this lockdown in phases, we should prepare for even more explosive rises in cases. So I want to believe that as we are doing this, we are doing it with caution and putting in place mechanisms and strategies in place, so that in case we have a rise in case, or the cases go back up, we can definitely attend to them.
Okay, so that's why we need to talk about, protecting those that are more vulnerable. And we've been told that people above 50 years, I think from 55, they should be more careful. But of course, if they decide to limit their contact with other people, what about the people around them? Let's talk about the reopening of schools first.
The reopening of schools is particularly a very, very sensitive topic. As much as we are very careful about the morbidities and mortalities, by morbidities and mortalities, I mean the sicknesses and deaths that have occurred with COVID-19, and the health effects, the consequences. We are also trying to, you can see that the government is also trying to make sure that our economic and social life and education is definitely at par. We don't want to just strike and kill every other aspect of our lives just because of COVID-19. So I can see that, and reopening of schools is definitely a good measure, but the government has also taken responsibility to bring forward a set of guidelines. So there's a 52-page guideline already being set by the schools, and even the government has said that they are going to get more teachers, put more infrastructure. All these things, I believe, are being put in place with serious thought, consideration, commitment, both financial, social, political commitment. So it's quite sensitive, and it's something that we should do very carefully. And but we can't shut down our schools forever. So we definitely have to have some faith in the fact that our government is going to do things right.
And compliance is always, been the issue. Yes, these guidelines they are there, but how much of the compliance or compliance to it that we have seen? Let's talk about those who are really, really more vulnerable. I've mentioned those who are, I think, 55 years and above. Let's talk about other people who should know that at this time that more and more activities are being opened up, they need to be more careful.
Yes, you've raised a very, very important point, Yomi. And, as much as many young people are going about there thinking they are strong, they are immune, they are going about without their masks, without social distancing, the bigger question is, what about those people that that are not so immune? The vulnerable, like you've said. The vulnerable people are the elderly people, the very young children. Fine, there's still some conflicting literature as to how immune young children are. But the elderly people, if you as a person, or we as adults, I mean the middle-aged people, are quite careless, we are going home to our parents. Older people are everywhere around us. They are in our houses. We have mothers, fathers, grandparents. So as much as we are easing the face of lockdowns and we are going about, we should also have individual responsibility. And we should also make sure that we take care of our old. Old people should not be aggregated in crowded surroundings in the name of the lockdown has been eased. Because we know, I saw this interesting case of an old woman who had to beg someone to help her buy something in a crowded mall. And that was, to me, wisdom. As an old person, you know that you are more vulnerable to COVID-19. And so we should take care of our old ones. Whatever we hear about, we are easing the lockdowns, we should still take individual responsibility to make sure there's social distancing, if not for our own sake, but for the sake of the vulnerable ones in our midst.
Now, let's talk about the reopening of worship centers. I know that some other states, have done that before now, but because Lagos is the epicenter, so it's really a big deal. What should we be looking at in terms of ensuring that people who are vulnerable, and, the government had also said that if you are 65 years and above, don't bother to go to any of those worship centers, and, of course, children below 15 years.
Lagos is a country, we know that, and our market systems, our churches, mosques, everywhere is always crowded. No matter how much, a lot of guidelines and have been put in place, checks and balances have been put in place, but it's quite difficult in a state like Lagos, where there's a lot of rush everywhere and we are crowded in a small geographical area. What if the government has done their part and they are enforcing it? And I think that there should be responsible enforcement by the law enforcement agencies. If they are doing all that and they do it adequately well, the people should also be carried along. People should be carried along. There should be a lot of sensitization. I always say that you cannot do enough of health awareness and advocacy. Let people know and repeat it severally, the same way we are doing using this program. Let programs that tell them, because we are easing down COVID-19 restrictions does not mean COVID-19 has left our state. Lagos is particularly vulnerable. Everybody comes to Lagos. Everybody is the hub of economic activity. So we are particularly at risk. And it will do us some good. Apart from the government taking the bold step to put in place checks and balances, it will do us a lot of good to have individual responsibility. In places where you cannot avoid social distancing, where social distancing is practically impossible, in places like Lagos Market and all these public places, please do wear a mask. Wash your hands regularly. even if you're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it for the vulnerable people that cannot do without coming in contact with you, and you need to protect them.
Taking responsibility, that's the word. Let's talk about some other people, for instance, who are dealing with other health conditions, like someone who's got asthma.
Yes, yes. And I have seen cases of that. People with respiratory illnesses, chronic respiratory illnesses, apart from asthma, like COPD. Some have hypertension, bad hypertension, heart failure, and other forms of chronic diseases. And they have to deal with COVID-19 on top of that. And it turned out badly. Whenever in the hospital setting or in the clinical setting, whenever we come across a COVID-19 patient that has a previously existing comorbidity, it gives us extra concern, because we know that the person is at higher risk of not recovering. Therefore, prevention in this vulnerable group is very, very important. And that's why I'm happy about the topic of this program. So please, let's protect them. These people should not go, like the government said, try and protect them from going to crowded areas. This is not the time to start visiting these people unnecessarily. If you're going to visit them at all, use your face mask, obey guidelines, wash your hands. Don't say COVID-19 is not out there again. You're coming from a place where they're not using masks, and you enter a person's home that has asthma. These people too should also try to make sure that they still stay in contact with their doctors for their regular appointments. If you're having asthma, this is the time to make sure that at least, even if it is teleconsultations, you're talking to your doctor frequently and you're assessing the medical care, the routine medical care that you need, so that you do not fall prey to COVID-19 issues.
No, so let's look at, of course, we've talked a lot of times about the symptoms for COVID-19, but there are some other conditions, that would mimic or some of those symptoms that COVID-19 will present. So let's talk about them and how to see if we can differentiate them, and while seeking medical help, at the appropriate time.
Particularly interesting, because the first thing that comes to my mind is malaria. I know a lot of people have probably had COVID-19 and they did not know, and because COVID-19 is still has just mild presentation in majority of people. Many people with COVID-19, as long as their immune systems are okay, they will recover. A lot of people have had flu, and in quote malaria, and other febrile illnesses. And because they moved around and the COVID-19 resolved, they never knew they had COVID-19. So it's particularly a difficult one. But the common symptoms of COVID-19, as we know, are tiredness, fever, malaise, and other less common ones like not being able to smell, not being able to taste, and back aches and other symptoms. If you think that you have COVID-19 and you're not sure whether it is malaria or any other febrile illnesses, or if it's a flu, the best thing to do is to call the NCDC hotlines, or you take the self-assessment survey. It's going to tell you whether you are low risk or high risk of developing COVID-19. If it turns you high risk, it's going to advise you. The self-assessment survey is going to direct you to where you can get tested. And there are a lot of sampling centers in different local government areas in Lagos State. So it's really quite difficult. Unless you do a test, you wouldn't know. COVID-19 is similar to many common illnesses.
I was going to say that some people who have other respiratory illnesses, bronchitis and all of that, once you start coughing or you start breathing in a particular manner, people, just move away from you. And even when you go to the hospitals, we've heard cases of where people have been rejected based on this. So what should the health workers also have in mind when they see patients like this?
Honestly, they still have to have what they have in mind. They shouldn't turn away. There is always empathy and the Hippocratic oath in medicine that you should not turn away a sick person, because it's our duty to make sure that we, especially during these COVID times, we give everybody that needs care. We make sure they get the care they need. But at the same time, you still have to protect yourself. So they should have a high index of suspicion. When you're seeing somebody still breathing anyhow or acting in any way that you suspect, have a high index of suspicion for COVID-19, but it does not mean you should not give necessary treatment. Definitely the old guidelines we know about, a lot of guidelines and protocols are put in places in many emergency centers, and doctors should do well to follow this and use their personal protective equipment.
Okay, we'll go on this break. When we come back, Doctor, you tell me if you have seen anywhere, around the health facilities that someone has been rejected based on the fact that they're exhibiting some symptoms that you would have COVID-19. That will be after the break. Just stay with us. welcome back. It's still Health Matters on Channels Television, and we're looking at protecting the vulnerable from COVID-19. You can join us in this conversation by calling 0805-468-3514 or send your tweet at yourme_Otaigbe. Doctor, before we went on that break, I was, saying I want to find out if you have seen anywhere. I know this may be putting you, under some kind of spotlight, but because I have seen where a woman, went to the hospital for eye check, and the doctor was like over 2 meters away, checking the eyes.
Yes, that's interesting, and that's not abnormal, I must tell you. As much as we can afford to do.
To the PPEs. Because if you have to see, if I come, okay, so I have this eye issue and you want to see me.
This is what I mean. I mean, right now, depending on what the doctor is checking for, there are some things that we no longer have to come very close to you to check for it. And there are some things that if we really, really need to come close to you, we just have to make sure we wear our PPE and do what we have to do. For example, in the dental clinics, in the eye clinics, a lot of their activities have been staggered down because their own procedures are procedures that generate aerosols. Aerosols are particles in the hair. So they are more at risk because of their kind of procedures. You do not expect them to be very close to you as normal or to be as carefree as they used to be. So areas like that, they definitely need to be very careful. And I've seen cases where actually the person came with an history suggestive of COVID-19 and the person needed COVID-19 test or had been tested for COVID-19, and you're coming to a hospital that is not
designated.
Thank you.
For COVID-19.
That is not designated for COVID-19. The hospital does not have a facility, so they are telling you the right thing to go to where you need to get tested. If they are giving you directions and providing you with the support, please appreciate it and follow that advice.
Okay. Yes. I think Ifeanyi is on the line. Hello, Ifeanyi from Abuja. Are you there? Okay, so you need to turn down the volume on your television set. Doctor, before Ifeanyi would call back, let's look at, we have talked about the vulnerables, the elderly, advising them to stay home and not, go into crowded places. But are we also looking at their mental health in terms of, okay, the grandma is going to be at home and the children, they are all gone out. What impact will this have on their mental health and how can we handle this?
Yes, we have to balance it all. We have to balance trying to prevent them from having COVID-19, a potentially dangerous disease that can kill them, and also making sure that they enjoy the quality of their mental health. And therefore, as much as possible, you want to restrict visitors, but you still want to provide some social support. You want to call them, probably do video calls, and at least have maybe 1 or 2 adults with them. So saying you should all stay away from elderly people doesn't mean that there should be nobody there to keep mama and papa safe and to even gist and discuss with them, or to even take them on walks around the house within the compound and premises that is not crowded. So the basic things still need to be in place. And if you can't go and reach mama and papa because other people are there, you can call. Do video call, make sure they are happy. Let them listen to their grandchildren on the phone. And so that's what we have to do. We just have to balance their mental health with their prevention risk.
Okay, so the churches, yesterday the mosques were opened in Lagos, and tomorrow is for the Christians, the churches, will be opened. What would you like to give to everyone who is planning, to attend the services tomorrow?
I know that we prioritize our worship and our religious lives here, and it is very important. But I just want to say, I just want to say that churches and church heads should take responsibility. If you do not know how to organize your services, get a COVID-19 consultant or a doctor or a public health specialist to help you look at the organization of your services and assist you with staggering it so that you're
Doctor,
not
please hold your thoughts. Let's be joined by Kayla. You continue from where you stop. Kayla? Kayla, are you there? Okay, I think some connection issues there. So, Doctor, please go ahead.
I was saying that the church heads need to take responsibility and organize their services in a way befitting. It's not just about worship, but about protection of their worshippers. And I was happy with one pastor or one or two pastors that I heard have taken the responsibility to say, we will continue online services for as much as we can. So fine, the government has given you guidelines, but it's up to you to look inward and see how you can be responsible to your worshippers and make sure they prevent COVID-19 and the COVID-19 disease. God gave us all this knowledge so that we can act on them. And so we have to definitely use this knowledge as much as possible, as much as possible.
It's not about the church leaders alone taking responsibilities for the people who will be attending, the faithful who will be attending the church services. What do you have for them?
Definitely. For instance, practices like sharing Holy Communion from a cup or hold your brethren tight and all those things or whatever it is. All these things, I worship too. So whether you're a Muslim or a Christian and you're entering a service ground, take responsibility, try to maintain social distancing. There should be hand sanitizers and washing basins at strategic points in the service area. When they are getting too many or you cannot handle your crowd, have a method, have a plan, a second plan, a plan B, on how you're going to take care of excess in a very polite, respectful, and yet healthy way.
Oh, okay. I think Kayla is back. Hello.
Hello, good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. About protecting the vulnerables, like you rightly said, you have to balance between mental health and their health as human beings. We talk about COVID-19. But when you're talking, you need to allow them have their social lives back. You don't have to keep them at home because, like you said, some other people are sad.
Wow, I think there's something, going on with that connection. But I think what she's saying is, how can we ensure that, okay, we want to protect the vulnerables, the older people. How can we ensure that they also have their social lives back?
Yes, and I've mentioned that we have to still keep connecting with them through the technology, that's phones and the rest. We also have to make sure, also the elderly and vulnerable people, if they sit down too long somewhere, they can have blood clots. They are susceptible to having blood clots from sedentary activities. So you have to make sure that they get their exercise and their walk. And you can designate one or two responsible members of your family to be with them at a time. And if you have to go and greet them, all of you should be on your masks. Because, like you said, we just have to balance both. They can't get COVID-19 and their mental health cannot be compromised. It's about both.
It's about both. Okay, so just before we go, we were targeting testing 2 million people in 3 months, but we are just above 300,000 now. How do you think we can, move closer, to the target set by NCDC?
By testing more, definitely. I'm aware that there are so many things that are not privy to the community, but the public stakeholders are aware of in terms of organization of these services, the funds needed. And so it's up to them. This is not even a question for them. What are the funds available? How can we ramp up this testing? Even at a period where we are easing the lockdowns sequentially, we should be able to have our backup plans and our testing facilities already stored. So in case there's a spike up in cases, testing facilities should be available, widespread. And I think, it's up to the government to work on whatever logistics are needed to make sure that testing facilities are ramped up.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for your time on the show today. We've been speaking with a public health physician, Dr. Ajoke Adewale. Thank you for your time.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank you all for watching. If you missed any part of Health Matters today, do log on to channelstv.com/podcast for both the audio and video versions. That's how we wrap up the program for this week. Thank you so much for being with us. I am Yomi Otaibi.